So the first takeaway that I want you to have is, first of all, when it comes to, and I agree with Holly or David or whoever said that it's not executive session. And you know what? We had another word for it when I was growing up. Instead of closed meeting, we called it backdoor deal making. And I want you to understand that there is no requirement in the law for backdoor deal making. There is no requirement in the law for executive session. And that is one of the biggest misnomers by local officials. A couple of years ago, a reporter that was working for me went up to a chairman of the Board of Education and said, "Ma'am, can you tell me why y'all were in executive session for 2 hours?" And the reporter sat there for 2 hours because she knew she'd be in trouble with me if she had left. Sat there for 2 hours waiting on them to come out of executive session. Do you know what citizens did during that 2 hours? They started dropping like flies. They started leaving one right after. It happens every month, doesn't it? So the reporter sat there and sat there and sat there until she was sitting there alone. Except maybe I think there were a couple of spouses in the room. And so she goes up and she says, "Ma'am, can you tell me why y'all are in executive session for 2 hours?" And here was the answer. We weren't required to. We had a personnel item and we were required to. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no requirement in the law to go into executive session for personnel. There is no requirement in the law to go into executive session for real estate. There is no requirement in the law to go into executive session for litigation. There is an allowance. There is an exception. There is a provision, but there is no requirement. So that every single time, local officials decide to go into executive session and conceal the people's business, they have chosen to do it. We need to send that message. Every single time they do it, they have conscientiously chosen to conceal the public's business. Now, I'm not saying that there are not times that that's a good choice to make. If, for instance, there is a potentially embarrassing or hurtful situation involving a personnel matter in local government that might, for instance, damage somebody's children or hurt somebody on a personal level, it would seem reasonable that local officials would discuss the contents of that embarrassing information outside of the public view. But it's still a choice. It's still a choice they're making. If, in fact, somebody has their hand in the till, somebody is taking money that belongs to me and you, I don't want you going behind executive, concealing yourself in executive session and disclosing that information. I want to know about it. And I ought to know about it because it's my money that somebody's been taking. If, in fact, and here's the thing that drives me crazy about real estate transactions. Everybody says the same thing about real estate transactions. We might compromise a deal if we talk about it out in open. Really? I wonder how many times that's actually happened. Yes, a bad open meetings law gives them the ability to talk about a real estate transaction. It doesn't require them to. And I actually think if you talked about it out in the open, you might sweeten the pot a little bit. You know? And I'm not saying it would go that way, but it may very well be, by being more transparent and open about these real estate transactions, they can actually bolster the public's position in a real estate transaction. Because who are they buying that property for? What is government? It's us. So they're buying that property for me, but I can't know about it. They're buying that property for me, but I can't know until after they've already bought it. Yeah, they have to take the vote in public, but all the negotiations are going on behind closed doors. How many of y'all would buy a house or a piece of property and not know any of the terms of the deal until you went into closing to sign the paperwork? So yes, they can. But my point is, they don't have to. you know that not every state allows real estate transactions to take place behind closed doors? Every state doesn't allow it. So here's the thing. If you can buy property and sell property and lease property in other states and do it all out in the open and it worked, why won't it work in Georgia?
It's usually who they're buying it from, not what they're buying.
And how much you're paying for it.
Relatives.
Well, again, I hope you take away on your blogs and in your websites and on the front pages of your newspapers, or at the very least on the editorial page, that you let people know that it's not a requirement. There is not a requirement in the law. And, you know, I honestly do believe what I'm telling you. And that is that this chairman of the Board of Education 100% believed she was required to go into executive session. She 100% believed that that was what she had to do. And I'm going to tell you why she believed that. Her attorney told her. One of your biggest enemies are going to be government lawyers. It is their intent to keep their clients out of trouble. My argument is, you're their clients. They're working for you. And that's one reason, and I run afoul of all of my legal friends when I say this, but that's one reason I don't really buy this whole attorney-client privilege thing. I am the client. You are the client. Government is not something other than the people. Government